Hello, and welcome back to part 3 of What If Naruto Was in the Walking Dead universe? When we last left off, the group, clearing their way through the prison catacombs, took a hit when Herschel was bitten in the leg by a walker. As a result, Rick fired his gun, and they began to get surrounded by walkers. The group make their way into a cafeteria where Naruto amputates Herschel's leg, and they discover a group of survivors, inmates from the prison. Holy shit! Upon hearing this, the group turns around, drawing their weapons without missing a beat. To their shock, they find the source of the interruption to be an inmate, a survivor of the prison, along with 4 other inmates, hiding behind a counter with a protective wire mesh. "Who the hell are you?" demands one of the inmates as he approaches the group. "Who the hell are you?" Daryl answers back with his crossbow pointed directly at the inmate's head. "Come on out of there nice and slow." The inmates do just that. All of them are dressed in typical prison jumpsuits and are covered in dirt and grime. Daryl, along with the rest of his group, notice that one particular inmate has a gun tucked in a jumpsuit, while the others carry sticks and bats. Naruto holds his kunai by the blade, tucking it into his sleeve with his wrist, ready to throw it in the blink of an eye if needed. "Y'all don't look like a rescue team," an inmate in the back says. "If you're waiting on a rescue team, don't," Rick replies, but then notices something as he looks over by where the inmates were hiding. "Looks like we found the pantry," says Rick. This declaration puts the inmates on edge. "We'll come back for it later. Right now, our priority is Herschel." "T-Dog, get the doors," Naruto says to T-Dog, who nods his head in confirmation, but before he gets a chance to comply, the inmate takes out his gun and points it at his head. "Don't open those doors," says the inmate with the gun. "Don't worry about it, we got this," claims T-Dog, drawing the inmate's attention back to him, along with the barrel of his gun. The second Naruto is out of the crosshairs of the gun, he flicks his kunai with a movement that is too quick to be perceived by anyone else, and it lands directly in the barrel of the revolver, destroying the gun. The inmate feels the weight in his hands shift and he sees the cause of it. "What the fuck?" the inmate curses, dropping his weapon in surprise. Naruto finds a satisfied smirk coming to his face as the rest of the group try to figure out what just happened. "Yeah, I wouldn't try using that. You'd only hurt yourself," Naruto says dismissively, as the others finally see what he was talking about. Rick and Daryl can't believe what Naruto managed to do. Feats of strength were one thing, but this level of skill was completely unheard of, and by no means achievable by a simple rush of adrenaline. "How the hell did he do that?" says the shortest of the inmates, Andrew. Naruto doesn't bother explaining to them and turns his focus to the mission on hand. T-Dog opens one of the doors and takes out the first walker, then falls back. "Ready up guys," Naruto says, and before the inmates can interrupt again, the first walker comes into view and T-Dog drives his crowbar directly into the skull of the walker. Not wasting any time, he immediately removes his pike and rushes back to the group. Once they are cleared, Naruto wastes no time in leading his group out of the room. "Let's move, we need to get Herschel out of here," Naruto says, not bothering to spare a glance at the prisoners, and doesn't wait for confirmation from the group. Naruto simply runs out the room and the others are forced to follow. The inmates look at each other and silently agree to follow them slowly. Navigating the hallways is far easier this time around now that most of the walkers have already been cleared. In the meantime, he leads his group following the signs for the way back that Glenn had made. While Naruto leads them back to the cell block, Rick and Daryl keep an eye out for the inmates that are following them at a respectful distance. Rick is unsure of how he will deal with them, but he realizes that it may not be up to him alone to decide. The group in the cell blocks hear footsteps echoing through the hallway. The gate opens with Naruto carrying Herschel, the first to walk through, followed closely by the rest of the group. Naruto's eyes immediately find Carol and he tells her about Herschel's leg. Beth begins to cry over the state of her father and Maggie comes over to console her. Naruto sets Herschel down in a cell bed and Carol begins to get to work on stopping the bleeding. "Lori, take Carl into the cell block. We've got some company," says Rick. "What company?" Lori questions with worry evident in her voice. "Survivors of the prison," inmates answers Daryl, not looking back, keeping his attention fixated on the entrance, aiming down the sights of his crossbow. "Are they dangerous?" Lori asks Rick. "We don't know just yet," Rick answers, and at this, Naruto comes over to Rick, standing nearly adjacent to him facing the opposite way, and placing his right hand on Rick's right shoulder, whispers something to him so that only he can hear. Rick's expression doesn't noticeably change, but his mindset does, leaving no room for any hesitation. Naruto walks back closer to the gate that leads to the cell block as if to stand guard, deciding to leave the talking to Rick for now. It's his group after all. Being the muscle is Naruto's favorite role anyhow. He takes a look over his shoulder and notices the kids peeking out of the cells to try and get a glimpse of the situation, but Naruto gives them a thumbs up, his signature grin, sending them back into their cells. That's far enough, says Daryl as the prisoners file into the room slowly. Naruto refocuses his attention back to the company in the room, folding his arms over his chest. Cell block C, cell number 4, that's my cell. Let me in, Gringo, says Tomas, the inmate that had the gun and is apparently the leader of the prisoners. The inmates take a quick look and easily see that they are outnumbered by a group that has evidently forced their way into the prison. Not only that, but they are outgunned. They don't dare to advance any further than they already have. But Tomas doesn't lose his confrontational demeanor. Today's your lucky day, fellas. You've been pardoned by the state of Georgia. You're free to go, Daryl replies back, ignoring Tomas's claims. What's going on in there? Tomas says, looking at the cell blocks. That's none of your concern, says Daryl, agitating Tomas. Don't tell me what's none of my concern, Tomas answers challengingly, taking a step advancing towards Daryl. This naturally raises the tension in the room even higher, along with Daryl's crossbow and the weapons of the others in the group. Forget about it, Tomas. Who cares about the cells? We're free now. But's in the largest inmate, Big Tiny. The other inmates agree, only caring about getting out and seeing the outside world along with friends and relatives. But Tomas presses the issue further. A group of civilians forcing their way into a prison they have no business being in. Makes me think there is nowhere else to go. Why don't you go find out? Answers Daryl uncaringly. Maybe we'll just be going then, says the only Caucasian of the prison group, Axel, deciding to try and defuse the situation before it gets out of hand. We're not going anywhere, Tomas objects uncompromisingly. Well, you're not coming in either, says T-Dog, raising his gun at Tomas. Hey, it's my house and my rules. I'll go where I damn well please, Tomas exclaims, but without his weapon his words are just empty threats. His arrogance and sense of entitlement are the only things that affect his reasoning. There ain't nothing for you here, so why don't you go back to wherever the hell you come from? Daryl forces back. Before the arguing can escalate any further, Rick finally decides to weigh in. Hey, enough already, there's no need for any of this, alright? With their weapons in hand and readiness to use them, there is no more room for arguing this point. They are not leaving this cell block and they are not sharing it with the inmates. Tomas, seeing that he can't win this, drops it for now. You guys rob a bank or something? What are you doing here anyway? He questions, which prompts Rick and Daryl to share a look. It didn't occur to them until just now that the inmates didn't know what has been going on in the world for the past 10 months. Rick answers slowly, how long have you guys been locked up in that pantry? Noticing the change in the air, Tomas feels a chill go down his spine for a reason he doesn't understand. About 10 months now. A fire broke out. All hell broke loose with it. We heard all kinds of crazy things. People going cannibal, people dying and coming back to life, adds Andrew. One of the guards looked out for us and locked us in that kitchen. He told us to sit tight and he'd be right back. He also threw me his spare gun, which that guy over there destroyed, Tomas explained bitterly, sending a glare Naruto's way. My bad. It was a pretty good shot though, you have to admit, Naruto says, more amused by the memory than guilty, which gets a light chuckle out of Daryl, Rick and T-Dog, much to the frustration of Tomas. Anyway, we've been thinking that the army or the National Guard was gonna show up any day now, says Oscar, the last of the 5 inmates. There is no army, Rick says, definitely. The inmates pause and focus their attention on Rick upon hearing his declaration. There's no hospitals, no police, and no schools. Nothing. Stunned into silence, the inmates struggle to digest this new information. All kinds of emotion wash through their faces at once, but the only thing that sticks is a lost feeling. Naruto on the other wonders if this is what he looked like when he first heard about it from Sophia. There are no phones, no internet. Nothing, says Rick. What's internet? Naruto wondered, quickly shaking the thought out of his head and deciding to ask Sophia about it later. As far as we can see, half the population has been wiped out. Probably more, Rick continues. Tomas and Andrew refuse to believe. There's no way, Tomas says in disbelief. Go see for yourself, Rick answers back, not caring for his tone. From there, Daryl motions for the prisoners to head for the exit that leads to the outside, and they do so. He follows them out along with T-Dog and Rick. Naruto goes to check on the status of Herschel and explain the situation to the rest of the group. Glenn and Maggie were about to follow him out, but before they could, they were both stopped by Naruto. Herschel losing too much blood. He won't make it at this rate, Naruto says to Glenn and Maggie. Maggie begins to shed a tear, telling Naruto he was right, that her father shouldn't have come with them. I'm going to lend a hand to Rick with the prisoner, but I saw an infirmary around the cafeteria where we found the prisoners. If you guys are up for it, I'm sure you'll find the medical supplies Herschel needs, Naruto says as Glenn and Maggie, without hesitation, agree and set off to get the supplies. As they do so, Naruto goes to follow the rest of the group outside, wanting to get a little fresh air himself, and to make sure the inmates didn't try anything right then and there. The inmates fan out a little just to stretch their legs. They hadn't seen anything but the walls of the room they had been trapped in, and were more than happy to see the very fences that had kept them within the confines of the prison yard. Feeling the sun against their skin was a welcomed feeling in spite of the intense heat. While they enjoy the fresh air, they still take notice of the walkers that up until now have mostly only heard about. They are currently being kept at bay by the fences of the inner courtyard, pushing it into the back of their minds for the time being. By the way, how did you guys make it in here anyhow? Asks Andrew, turning to Daryl and his group. Actually, this guy let us in, Daryl responds, pointing behind him over to Naruto. Hearing this, the rest of the inmates turned their attention over to the blonde who was examining the perimeter of the inner courtyard. His name's Naruto, and now that I think about it, I don't think any of us know how he got in, Rick mentions. Naruto turns around and finds that the rest of the group is staring at him. What? He says. How'd you get in here? Tomas asks challengingly. Naruto can't help but roll his eyes at the tone in his voice. He would have responded sarcastically, but he never did tell Rick's group how he got past the fences. Not caring whether or not they believed him, he answered, I jumped over the fence. Rick's group is unsure if he's joking or not, but Tomas and Andrew take his answer as a form of mockery. You jumped over that 12-foot fence and barbed wire? Andrew asks unbelievingly, to which Naruto only grins and responds, yeah, I've got mad hops. I didn't want to cut open the fence to get in, even if I did have something to tie it up with. It's better that there aren't any compromises or weak points. This place can be a fortress, though there's a long way to go before it's perfected. Hearing that the man who managed to break into their prison also had more long-term plans to stay here, but Tomas on edge. By no means did he care for sharing what he now understands to be the only secure place anyone could find in all of Georgia. Examining one of the infected bodies on the ground, prodding it with a stick, Big Tiny asks out loud, so what is this, a disease? Rick replies somberly, yeah, and we're all infected. Hearing this, the inmates turn their attention back over to Rick, a sense of fear and dread beginning to resurface. What do you mean infected? Like AIDS or something? Axel asks stupidly. If I were to kill you by putting an arrow in your chest, you'd come back as one of these things. It's going to happen to all of us. Naruto paused upon hearing this from Daryl. Naruto knew that getting bit or scratched by one of these things would transmit the disease, but not that you would ultimately turn you into one of them. This initially led him to believe that the disease was virus-like in nature, but to hear that it was already inside everyone made him question that. Sophia hadn't mentioned that to him when they first met, which probably means that she wasn't aware. If so, then how did Rick and his group find out about it? If everyone already has it inside them, could it be a genetic mutation? If that's the case, that would imply that everyone here would have a common ancestor, and after thousands and thousands of years the mutation occurred. Either that or whatever caused this thing was simply dormant this whole time. If that were the case, what happened recently that triggered such a violent outbreak? All these questions plagued Naruto's mind. There's no way the Robin Hood cats took out all these freaks. There must be 50 bodies out here, Tomas states, not believing that a group of civilians could get past the defenses of the prison along with the monsters that were guarding it. We didn't. He did. He took out all the walkers in the yard by himself. Our group helped him clear out the inside as thanks for letting us in, Rick explains, almost forgetting how implausible it sounds. He still wouldn't believe it if it weren't for the fact that he witnessed it with his own eyes. You expect us to believe that load of crap? Andrew disputes. One person jumped over the fence without getting torn up by the barbed wire, and then wiped out an army of those things by himself? I call bullshit. Naruto could only laugh. Sure, it wouldn't sound believable to the people of this world, but that's why it's so amusing to him. Tomas and Andrew didn't see what was so funny to him. Fine, don't believe it. It doesn't change the fact that we're here, says Naruto, as Tomas makes his way closer to him. Where did you come from anyway? He questioned. Despite the hostility in his voice, Rick, Daryl, and T-Dog were still interested to hear the answer themselves. They have only recently become acquainted with Naruto and know little about him. Naruto looks over to Rick's group, putting his hands in his pockets. This wasn't a conversation he was going to have with someone he just met, especially one with a bad attitude like Tomas. I'm not from around here, to tell you the truth. But for the time being I'll be sticking around indefinitely, Naruto says with determination. For the most part Naruto didn't want to kill or get rid of the inmates. He doesn't need any potential enemies thinking much of him. But even still, it's annoying when people don't understand the position they are in. Looking back over to Rick, Tomas poses the same question to his group. How about you then? Not from around here? Atlanta. It was completely overrun, literally millions of walkers roaming the streets. Naruto winced slightly upon hearing this. The only time he had ever seen a massive horde of walkers was when he and Sophia had to leave the neighborhoods. But even still that was only a fraction of what Rick was talking about. He puts it in the back of his mind for the time being. But if he wants to make this place secure, he'll need to come up with a way to systematically destroy armies of walkers all at once, without his jutsu. So what? You two meet one day and decide to be best friends forever? Is that it? Naruto and Rick share a look and they can't help but smirk at how unusually fast they became allies. Yeah, basically, a little more complicated than that, but that's about it. Why make enemies out of decent people, right? Rick says to Tomas as if to suggest something else. Tomas nods his head and points past Naruto's left shoulder. I guess you guys can take that area over there by the water. You should be comfortable. I believe my new friends were planning on using that area for farming, says Rick. We'll help you move your gear out, Tomas replies, not missing a beat. And Naruto rolls his eyes at the mere notion that Tomas has any control over the situation whatsoever. That won't be necessary. We took out these walkers. This prison is ours, Rick replied sternly, looking Tomas in the eyes. The two argue for a while and the situation becomes more tense until Naruto decides to step in. Alright, that's enough. It's a big prison, alright. We can both share it without ever having to cross paths, right? So why don't we try to figure something out that'll work for the both of us, alright? Naruto forces the two apart with his arms. Tomas was unnerved by how easily Naruto was able to move him, and so is Rick. Even when feeling the weight of Naruto's strength for the first time, Rick and Tomas didn't break eye contact for a second. I don't see that happening, says Tomas. Neither do I. Rick doesn't like the idea of sharing the same his pregnant wife will be occupying with a bunch of convicted felons. And he knows the rest of the group won't like it either. Rick looks over to Naruto who, for once since meeting the prisoners, isn't wearing his signature grin and is instead looking right back at him straight in the eye. Naruto nods his head forward, just slightly, barely noticeable. But it's enough to get the message across. Rick is instantly reminded of what Naruto whispered to him earlier. With that in mind, Rick decides to let Naruto continue. You guys had a lot of food in that pantry, didn't you? Naruto says, looking back to Tomas, who snaps his attention over to him. Frowning, he responds, yeah, what of it? Ignoring the reluctance in his voice, Naruto continues to explain. I'll get some real weapons for your group and help you clear out a cell block. If you give us half the food you have in that pantry. Tomas looks over to the rest of his group. He figures if these three were able to clear out the entire yard and a cell block, they should be able to clear out a few cells for themselves. Rick, on the other hand, doesn't see why Naruto would volunteer for a bunch of low-life criminals whose leader has clearly displayed aggressive hostility. He looks over to Daryl, who shakes his head, not liking the idea one bit. If you guys don't like it, you'll have to try your luck on the road. Those are your only options, Naruto states, issuing the ultimatum. Hearing this is enough to make up their minds. Fine, we'll give you half. And you clear out a cell block, Tomas confirms as he moves past Rick to head back into the prison. Before he can pass Naruto, however, Naruto grabs Tomas' arm by the elbow. In a hush so that only the two can hear and with a dark edge in his voice, Naruto threatens forcefully. I may be a nice guy, but if I so much as catch your scent anywhere near these people you'll be begging me to kill you. Tomas can't bring himself to look back to Naruto. The venom in his voice nearly paralyzing him. He's heard a lot of threats made to him in his lifetime, but there is finality in Naruto's voice. It was a promise, and Tomas knew it. Both groups went back to the pantry, walking in silence for the most part. Rick's group, along with Naruto, independently evaluated the inmates and their potential threat. Rick and Daryl questioned Naruto quietly on his motive and reasoning for even offering to clear out a cell for them. Together, they could have easily forced them out and kept most of the food for themselves. giving them a fraction to take with them out on the road. Naruto explained that he would take full responsibility for whatever happened. No matter how the world has changed around them, if the opportunity to be civil is present, one should seize it. Even still, Naruto was always ready to deal with whatever this world throws at him, which he proved earlier by disarming Tomas. Naruto's reasoning alone wasn't quite enough to convince Daryl and Rick, though T-Dog is slightly optimistic given that none of the inmates have a gun on them. They would be of little threat. For the moment the group was willing to let Naruto play it out. After collecting half of the food, much to the annoyance of Tomas and Andrew, they brought back a respectful load of canned and bagged food that wouldn't spoil anytime soon, enough to last the group months. Rick and Naruto also take the chance to check in on Herschel. Glenn and Maggie had found the medical supplies and had stopped the bleeding. Now all that's left is to wait and see if he wakes up. During this time Lori pulled Rick aside to ask how they'd be dealing with the inmates. She understood that her relationship with her husband was strained, but approaching him concerning the safety of their group was still something she felt she had the right to inquire about. That being said, she felt no hesitation in expressing her doubt when Rick explained that Naruto was the one who decided to allow the inmates to stay. While everyone here was grateful for everything that he had done for them, he really shouldn't have that kind of authority. Rick agreed but explained that he wasn't so sure that he could stop him even if he tried. Naruto had insisted that by no means did he expect Rick or anyone from his group to help him, but when T-Dog volunteered to help him, Rick couldn't help but join to make sure his friend would be safe. Daryl, being Rick's right-hand man, agreed to help as well. With that being said, Lori mentioned to Rick that she needed to talk about Naruto more extensively, and as a group. Rick didn't know why Lori was so on edge when she mentioned it, but he agreed nonetheless. Everyone regroups with the inmates, bringing them a small collection of melee weapons for the mission. Naruto heads the discussion for the operation, but after seeing the collection of weapons, which doesn't include any firearms, Tomas expresses his irritation. "If you hadn't broken my piece we wouldn't need these. I did you a favor. Using those things only attracts more of them than you have bullets," says Naruto. "You only use them when your backs are against the wall, and save a bullet for yourself," Daryl explains. Tomas gives him a cross look, but lets it go, seeing his point. Naruto interrupts ahem, "With that out of the way, let's go over our attack plan, yeah? I'll take point with Tomas. Rick, you take the rear with Andrew." At the mention of this pair, Naruto gave Rick a knowing look who nodded in understanding. "Daryl, you have the right flank with Oscar. Axel and Big Tiny take the left, and T-Dog, you support anyone that needs the help." With a look around the room, Naruto makes sure they're all on the same page, and they confirm. "All right, now, no one breaks rank. You could compromise the entire group or get mistaken for a walker and will be cut down just the same. Aim for the head, it's the only way to kill these things," says Rick. "You don't need to tell us how to kill a man," Tomas arrogantly says. Naruto and Rick don't bother looking at each other when hearing the boast. They know full well by now they ain't men. There's something else, T-Dog reminds the inmates. "Just aim for the head and don't bother with anything else." With that being said, Naruto walks out and Tomas follows, everyone else right behind them. As they walk deeper into the catacombs of the barely lit prison, the anxiety skyrockets as the heartbeats of the prisoner pound hard in their chests. Before they can see them, they hear a few walkers that are just around the corner of the hallway. Axel, out of fear, alerts everyone of its presence, but in doing so gives away their position. In a mad rush, the prisoners charge the first walker they see. They pin it down and stab it everywhere, except for the head. Naruto smacks his head in frustration, and the others look at each other in disappointment. "What did we just talk about?" yells Naruto. Daryl wastes no time in shooting an arrow through its head and ending the pathetic display. "Two rules, aim for the head and don't break rank." "Let's go. There are more of them," demands Naruto, as he looks past Tomas and moves past him. Tomas gives Andrew a look before catching up with Naruto. Rick sees this, but doesn't bother with it when he moves in step with Andrew. The group makes their way to an intersection where they only have two fronts to defend from. Naruto and Tomas take the right while Tiny and T-Dog take the left. The others stay behind to support. As a horde of walkers comes in on the right, Naruto and Tomas take them out one at a time and pull back, Daryl and Oscar covering them. The walkers nearly overwhelm them from the right flank, but of course Naruto doesn't let that happen. putting his shuriken to use with enough power to cut through multiple at once. This goes largely unnoticed by the group, even by Tomas, given how dark it is. The sounds of the growling and moaning place a forceful grip of fear on Big Tiny, and he slowly slips away from the group. This isn't seen by anyone in the dark, and no one does anything to stop him. Before Big Tiny can turn the corner, a walker creeps up behind him and scratches him on his shoulder. He screams out as he pushes the walker away and brings his axe down on his head. His cry gets the attention of the group just as they finish their end, and they come over to help. A much smaller wave of walkers turning the corner is dealt with swiftly, mostly by T-Dog and Andrew. Big Tiny does what he can to keep his cool, but he can't stop his hands from shaking. Naruto comes over to examine the wound, which stretches from his shoulder to his back. "I'm sorry," Naruto exclaims calmly, but it does nothing to settle Tiny's nerves. Shaking his head in denial, he cries, "I'm fine, I don't feel any different, I just stopped the bleeding." "I'm not turning into," but his words die there, as he is hacked to death by Tomas with his tomahawk. Even after Big Tiny's body falls to the ground, Tomas continues to drive his axe into his head until he runs out of breath. Covered in the blood of his former cellmate, Tomas finally stops and notices the rest of the group staring at him. Naruto could hardly believe it, but he didn't show it. Andrew almost didn't care, but Oscar and Axel suddenly remembered why Tomas was their leader before they were locked in that pantry. Out of all of them, Tomas was the only one that was convicted of murder, and it constantly showed. Rick signals to Daryl that if Tomas were to so much as make a single move towards them, they'd cut him down. "You said aim for the head, right?" Tomas says in amusement. This enrages Naruto, but again he doesn't show it. There was nothing that disgusted him more than allies who betrayed each other the way Tomas just did to Big Tiny. Not bothering to talk about what just happened, he moves on, leaving the rest of the group behind. Only Andrew follows immediately. Not wanting to wait for another horde of walkers to find them, the rest finally decide to move on. They walk down a few hallways and arrive at a laundry room. They file in and close the door behind them. They can hear growling from a second set of doors. There's a lot more room and they have a single front to defend this time, so the group fans out. Naruto stands next to Tomas and doesn't bother looking at him. T-Dog stands to Naruto's left along with Oscar. Axel stays off to the back and Andrew stands right next to Rick with Daryl to his right. "Only open up one of the doors to funnel them in," Naruto says with an even tone. Tomas walks over to the double doors and grabs hold of the handles. He looks over his shoulder to the group to see if they're ready, but makes eye contact with Andrew, who nods his head. Tomas turns around and opens both doors and quickly regroups with the rest, effectively pissing off Naruto, Rick, Daryl, and T-Dog. "I said only one door," Naruto yells out. Shit happens. There's no time for a shouting match as the walkers pour into the room. It's a mad rush as everyone moves as quickly as they can to kill as many walkers as fast as possible. Tomas hacks away while Naruto deflects and places calculated stabs to the head of each walker. Daryl shoots an arrow into one walker and then takes out his hunting knife. Rick cuts them down with his machete. T-Dog forces them down with his riot shield and drives his crowbar into the following walker. Oscar does what he can while Axel cowers behind everyone, only getting involved when necessary. And finally Andrew swings away with his bat. In the midst of the battle, Tomas deflects a walker directly onto Naruto, who reacts by grabbing its arms and cracking its skull with a head but empowered by his ninja headband. This doesn't go unnoticed by Rick and Daryl, but Naruto doesn't falter for a second. Tomas takes another swing at a walker to his left, but comes dangerously close to cutting Naruto, who would have caught the worst of it if he didn't dodge it. The horde of walkers is finally cleared, and the group takes a breath for only a second. Daryl eyes Tomas, resetting his crossbow, and has it at the ready. Rick rests his hand on his revolver, looking over to Andrew, who swallows hard in expectation. Naruto, on the other hand, looks Tomas dead in the eye and approaches him. "Nearly got me there. What was it?" "Shit happens, right?" Naruto says slowly, his voice completely even. Tomas grips his tomahawk tightly, looking at the side of Naruto's head. Suddenly, Tomas swings his arm and swipes downward at Naruto as fast as he can with his axe. Naruto merely catches his hand and breaks his wrist. Not giving him a second chance, Naruto steps in and drives his kunai directly into Tomas's head, killing him. No, Andrew cries out as he's pushed down by Rick. Oscar and Axel step back as T-Dog and Daryl turn around and keep them in their sights. Frantic Andrew tries to run out of the room as fast as he can. "I got him," Rick says as he runs after Andrew, chasing him through the catacombs. They eventually find their way outside and run into a horde of walkers. Rick shuts the door on Andrew and leaves him for the walkers. Naruto turns around slowly with a dark look in his eyes and moves over to the other two inmates until he's standing over them. Oscar and Axel are forced to the ground by T-Dog and Daryl. "Now then, what do we do with you two?" asks Naruto. Alright everyone, that's going to be it for part 3 of What If Naruto Was in the Walking Dead Universe. Be sure to like and subscribe for part 4 of this series, and let me know in the comments other what ifs you'd like to see. Until next time.